whatever they're doing, it all relates to that. If we don't like it, we don't like that relationship, and we don't like the song, we find it interesting, it's because of the relationship of those notes to this one bass note. So a little over 100 years ago, they came up with this concept of, instead of always changing keys and always resolving and using chords to go to the 5 before you go to the 1, and tension and resolution, composers started to think, well, why not just have one note is the key and just keep changing the key around the one note? So you could have 12 different keys, but the audience is still just hearing bump, bump, bump over and over again. Ravel's Bolero, anybody know that? Dun, da, 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 da. That's it. And that's a perfect example. It's just one note, but there's all this beautiful music that goes around it. And I was taught this concept in high school from my high school music teacher. I was fascinated by it. It's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I thought this is so much more interesting than simply copying what the jazz and blues players have been doing for decades, which is always using these chords. You can't go to, you go to 1, and then you go to 2, and then you go to 5, and then you change keys, you gotta go to 2 and 5 before you go to the 1. And I thought, well, this is the stupidest thing ever, because everyone's doing it. So where's the originality in that? So with this idea of the pitch axis, I could do songs like Not of the Surf, which is decidedly, a weird song, never to be played on the radio ever. Although I have to say, it was in this town in 1988 at 4 in the morning that I walked into a 7-Eleven and they were playing the Enigmatic, which is very much similar to that in that vein. And I thought, wow, I guess some kids do play this music at the right time, 4 in the morning, 7-Eleven. Got no royalties for that. no free Slurpees or anything like that. But your question is kind of interesting for another sort of a side reason, which is I haven't really heard a concept coming from composers that's really different, as groundbreaking as that, or as Sonata Allegro Form was, or just basically what Bach pioneered, being able to play in all keys, and the people who made instruments. Those were huge leaps for Western music, and that's kind of like what we're doing right now. What I have noticed, however, which is more important, is modern society has decided that you don't really have to be in time, and you don't really have to be in tune. As a matter of fact, you can be completely discordant to the bass line, and still it can be interesting, and people like to hear what it sounds like. And that really didn't come about through, it didn't come about in symphony halls, and certainly not in jazz clubs where everybody tunes up and there's this discipline for being in key and everything. That came from hip hop, and the way that they decided to change the world was to be later than late. So the idea of being in the pocket is something you have to be of that generation to totally get it, or younger. And tuning as well, they don't really care about that kind of stuff. They're listening to the sound of whether it's a new loop or an old loop or a sample, and they're just seeing how it performs in the song. This is really different. I mean, you think about if you're a blues player or a chicken picker or you're a jazz player, you basically copy what is the accepted sounds and approaches of the most revered players. So if I had to play blues for you now and I started with an Albert King lick, everyone would nod their head, go, yeah, he knows Albert King, we all know Albert King, we all love Albert King. So we're all in the same club all of a sudden, you know what I mean? It's not very original to do that at all. All I did was copy some guy who was brilliant, you know what I mean? So it's a different kind of a thing. I think in popular music, eventually everybody comes together in the center and forms their own club until somebody comes along and disrupts it. And so that we're just seeing that kind of play out. So, but that is by far the most interesting thing, because if you look back in recorded history, nobody ever purposely played so late or so out of tune unless it was for comedy. You know what I mean? And certainly before the advent of recording, we have no written records of people purposely playing out of tune and out of time, or playing someone else's piece for 2 bars in a new piece of music when no one else was playing. But that's what modern recording is like. Hit songs are like that now, and they get billions of streams. It's, you know, as if there are writers here in the audience, we have to face reality. That's our audience. If you want to sell a record or get streams played by people who are 10 to 20 years old, that's what they love. That's what they're listening to. Or let's put it this way, that's what they accept as music. So we, as musicians, we have to let that in and say, okay, that's okay. I used to try to stay in tune and stay in time, but now it's different. But it's just not being bad. There's an art form to it. You know, okay, I'll start over there. Yeah.
Yes.